All right, we're ready to begin.
Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock and I'm going to call this Lacey City Council work session to order on September 8th. We have a 4-item agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. We have an agenda. First up on our agenda is the capital facilities plan briefing.
I'll give a quick introduction while Julie brings up the presentation into Zoom there. So we have Julie Bassick and Beth Batchelder here with Makers. I think they've been here once before to visit the council about a major revision to our capital facilities plan that we've been underway with for the last 9 months or so, looking at our general government facilities. So they did provide some information previously on some existing conditions, and now they are back to provide some alternatives. So they basically did a needs assessment, kind of showed what some of the gaps were in our existing facilities, and now have come up with some very high level alternatives to present to the council tonight. So these are going to be some recommendations that have been provided by Makers and through our staff review team as well. We have Ashley Smith here from Public Works and Justin Beard from Parks, part of the staff team working on this as well. So with that, I think turn it over to you guys and go forward, and happy to answer any questions when we get to the end.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We are delighted to be here to present our work in progress update for council. Quick reminder about the project for those that may be new to this. We are aiming to improve the understanding of the facilities that Lacey is going to need to serve your community into the future. We are trying to build support for investments through a transparent, collaborative process and create a user-friendly capital facilities plan at the end. We are wrapping up phase 2 alternatives. So this is our council briefing. We hope to hear from you any major questions, red flags, or things we haven't thought of that we can help take forward to the last phase of the project. There's about 23 facilities, 200,000 square feet in scope. We are focused on administration, public works, animal services, and parks, culture, and recreation facilities. So today, as I mentioned, we're gonna let you know what we have found to date, obtain your feedback. If you have any major questions or concerns, this is the time, because where we are today will really shape the work in the next phase. We are going to let you know about some further areas for further study at City Hall and Animal Services. So those, we have some findings and we need to do some more work. So we'll let you know about that. And then from here, we'll be collaborating with directors to explore some City Hall options, refining the recommendations per the feedback we received from yourself and directors, and then drafting the phasing and financing approach to bring that back to council in the last phase of the project. Okay, we are going to introduce or summarize our major findings from the needs assessment, just to remind you, a few slides there, and then talk about how we developed the alternatives and then get into it. So first, tonight is the night that we start to talk about investments that are needed and some estimated costs to pay for those investments. There's going to be some big numbers, and so we just wanted to couch this in the bigger context of why this investment is needed. And Lacey, as you know, is midway through, well into your transition to a mid-sized community. You're really a different city than you were 20 years ago. Your population has grown and is projected to continue to grow, and you haven't made major investments in your civic facilities in over a decade. Other thing to keep in mind as a civic facilities plan is a long-term phase strategy. So even though we are going to be talking about some significant investments that are needed, it's not needed in your budget next month or even 2023. What's needed is develop a plan today so that you can work out a reasonable and feasible approach to phase in those investments over the next several decades. So as you recall from the needs assessment, Lacey's biggest issue is it does not have enough space. So specifically, your public works operations is very short of the space you need, and notably animal services is short of space as well. In terms of condition and function, you're in reasonable shape, and it's kind of the same players that are showing up again. So public works, animal services, and the central and east wings of City Hall are the areas of your portfolio that are in the worst shape functionally and from a condition perspective. So there are 10,000 permutations of how you might solve any one of these facilities issues, and we are looking at your entire portfolio. So what we do, what we've developed over decades of doing this work, is we take a look at, hey, what are the minimal levels of investment that we can make here to address some issues and create some benefits? On the other end of the spectrum, what can we do to solve all the problems and set you up for what you're going to need for the next 20 to 30 years in terms of space and function? And then what's a maybe middle ground that might work for you? So that's how we structured the alternatives. They explore different funding levels and different placements for your departments. They attempt to address issues, give you the space you need, and they include components that can be mixed and matched. So sometimes we have an alternative that has 2/3 of it is really right, but there's a third from a different alternative that we want to combine. Each of these alternatives is evaluated based on performance. We have a pretty specific rating system we go through, but in summary, we take a look at how they function. How much does it cost, both initially and over time? And then how risky is it? So how challenging is it going to be to implement? Are there political or other risks that we need to take into account? And that's how we make decisions working with your city staff and leadership. We also work through all of the alternatives to make sure that we're working toward developing your facilities to meet the principles that we've established through the process. So all the alternatives are working toward you all having facilities that are safe and healthy for your workforce and your community. They're sustainable and resilient, so they get you further toward your goals for lowering your energy use, protecting investments that you've already made. They're future ready. That means they get your staff set up to work together and make sure you have the space you need to support your community growth. And then they're community focused. So where we can make improvements to the customer service components or to the neighborhoods within which these investments are made, we try to build that in. And finally, in all this lead up, our last slide is to give you a little bit of context about the costs that you're going to see later in this presentation. So we are experiencing a very unusual cost environment. Those of you in the business or working on projects for yourself in your home are probably aware that we're experiencing construction cost inflation at rates that I haven't seen in my 25-year career. So pre-COVID, we were looking at an average of 3.5% construction cost inflation per year. We were already in a high environment at 5% right before COVID. This last year, from January to January 2022, it was a 14% building cost escalation, and it has been more since January, as you all know. So we're giving you estimates as best as we can, but with the caveats of, hey, hopefully as you are phasing in these projects over time, you'll be able to regain some cost efficiency as the market settles down and supply chain issues are worked out and the labor issues are worked out. So hopefully these are conservative numbers given the cost environment that we're in. Couple other things just to note is that all these numbers right now are in 2022 dollars. So once we get through this phase and understand the direction that we're headed, we'll work with your leadership team to come up with a phased approach and then inflate those project costs accordingly. Doesn't make any sense to do that now because we want to have an apples to apples comparison of different options and ways to go. The only other thing I'll mention here, sorry, this is a really busy slide packed with details, is that we worked with a local broker and the city to come up with some reasonable planning level property acquisition and sales prices and have incorporated those where they make sense with the different options. Okay, that was a lot of background information. I'm gonna take a pause and ask, is there any clarification questions or curiosities so far? All right, let's get into the good stuff.
All right, for your public works operations, as you recall when we were here last, they are in fair condition and very undersized. And the headquarters specifically is site constrained. There's not the greatest circulation. There's some security issues. There's just no room to accommodate the growth that is needed. And also to note, your high value fleet and equipment is mostly exposed. Other two facilities that we're looking at for the alternatives phase would be the city yard, which also is in need of some security improvements as well as some organization. And then the Goose Pond property that currently the facilities division is at, and it's owned by the water department. So we had 4 alternatives developed for public works, all based on checking out designs for the operations center. But then we took into consideration relocating different divisions into different areas. So the first one is just minor improvements to the existing layout that you have. So it maintains the divisions where they're at right now, which is everybody besides facilities is at the headquarters, the operations center, and facilities division is at Goose Pond property. And this is just minor improvements to the heated parking, and then also adds some limited shop and warehouse space. So you can see it doesn't really do much as far as getting you to meet your 2045 needs.
Beth, I'm gonna interrupt you there just for a second. The way to read these graphics, and we realize they're illegible, we'll give you a big one when we get to the recommendation so you can really see what we're talking about. But the dark blue, sort of purpley is renovation, and the teal is new construction. The light blue is surface parking, and this like red hatched is demolition. So that'll let you have a quick glance at what these graphics are telling you.
The gray is the existing buildings.
Yeah, thank you.
So for the minimal option, we explored what would it be like if Parks was relocated. So the idea for this one is to move Parks out to the new Cuyo Park facility. And this would be 100% of Parks. It would meet, the idea is to meet all their 2045 needs at this new facility. So when they move, we're going to demolish their shop, improve circulation a little bit, do a minor renovation to the area that they've vacated in the administrative building. But you can see that it still is not getting you to the exact numbers that you need for the 2045 needs. The mid-range option, this one we moved Parks still to Cuyo Park. We also moved transportation to the city yard so that we just tried to make some space at the operations center. And you'll see things are now a lot more aligned vertically, which actually improves circulation. And this is maintaining keeping that admin building, but making some really big renovations to it to be able to accommodate the space that's needed. And then in the all-in option, this actually practically wipes the slate clean of the facilities that are on site. But the idea is to bring back bring back all of the different divisions. So nobody's located anywhere else. It could increase efficiency because everybody's co-located. That's what they definitely prefer. But you can see that it still does not meet all of the 2045 space needs because it's very space constrained. And that's even with a multi-story admin and crew building. With all of these options, the idea is that the surrounding properties that are now in beige, as you can see, we think that those would be good to purchase when that becomes available, if that's feasible at any time for any option, just because it's good to purchase now while you have that opportunity so that you can expand, take advantage of any facilities that are on those sites. But specifically, it would be really beneficial for the all-in option because this is the one that, it would be just help it out and maybe you would actually help it to meet 100% of the 2045 building and parking needs.
You want questions as you go?
Yeah, please do.
So tell me why the all-in option is better than the mid. I mean, the mid-range meets 100% of the building needs, 95% of the, it seems to meet a lot more of the needs than the all-in. So why would we consider the all-in?
Yeah, so great question. Let's look at the cost numbers and then let's look at our evaluation and we'll answer that. But the quick answer is because relocating transportation to City Yard is an issue operationally. There's a lot of risk associated with the City Yard site. There's only a small portion of that site that is not fill and would not be really challenging to construct on. And if you have to purchase a site for that operation, then you lose efficiency and increase risk. And transportation operations are most aligned with water, wastewater, and the other functions. They want to be by fleet maintenance. They want to have the opportunity to share equipment and share training with the crew and fill in for each other. So yeah, I guess I jumped the gun there and just answered, but those are the reasons.
Did you have another question?
I do. I was just curious how Cleo Park was chosen as a site for parks. It's so remote from where we are now.
I can answer that.
Oh, please do.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason we selected that is we needed a facility out there as Cuyo Park grows just to maintain it. And it was an opportunity to potentially, if we are never able to accommodate centralization and you have to decentralize, that it's an opportunity. It's undeveloped. There's the space to build. We're going to be building some facilities there anyway. So that's the logic behind it.
But it's a good question.
We love parks. It's not that we wanted to distance from them.
It's
They
a
want to be out of sight is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, there are two other public works facilities that address the two other parks, the RAC and Rainier Vista. They're functioning well, so we didn't include them in the alternatives phase. And the idea is that, the Cuyo Park would also need something like that. And why not make use of that space and just put everybody there to free up some space here.
Just to add on to that, there is a satellite maintenance facility planned in the Cuyo Park master plan already. So it was an expansion of that facility.
Gotcha.
Thanks. Great questions. All right, hold on to put your seatbelts on here. So when we look at the costs, all of these options require a significant investment in facilities for public works. They range from a minimum of 8 to 10 million for status quo, which gets you very little in terms of it addresses some immediate issues, makes some improvements, gets you very little in terms of helping support the long-term needs of Lacey. All the way up to a new option, which we haven't introduced yet, which is, hey, these are really expensive by the time you get to mid-range and all in. We're looking at between, this is a $50 to $70 million investment, whether you make that investment on your current site and keep everybody together, or you make that investment on 3 satellites at Cuyo, at City Yard, and that's a lot of new construction. And actually, when you leave, you do have a nice fleet shop and you have some existing infrastructure at your current site that you can build on. And even though it's not the majority of your functions, you still are getting some efficiency and building on those facilities already there. So we took a look at what if we just move? What if we could find 8 acres of appropriately zoned and located with the right access property in and around Lacey? What would that look like? And what we found is because you need 8 acres of property and you only own 5, because you need to improve that property in order to meet your needs and you got to rebuild everything. And because that eliminates any opportunity to phase in the construction, right? If you move your operation, you can't be half in one location and half. I mean, you could be, but it'd be extremely operationally inefficient and challenging for your crews. So you have to go all in. So for those reasons, including the additional cost, we were less excited about that option for the future.
We sold those acres to DOT.
You might have. I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
Well, they bought that.
So bottom line, as a summary, and then I'll pause here for questions and your feedback, is though we realize that relocating public works would return a good commercial property to the tax rolls, right? That's clear. There's good retail demand for the frontage that your current property sits at. However, it's significant additional cost, but more than that, it's significant additional risk. I forgot to mention that we had our broker, and we did a GIS analysis of all of the property that met the basic minimum requirements. We also had our broker do a market search to see, hey, what if anything is out there? What if anything has sold over the last several years? There's just nothing, basically. The pool of possible options is so small that the risk for that option, we think, is even more significant than the numbers themselves. So we took all in out, and then we took a hard look at status quo and minimal. And we said, okay, sure, those are the least cost, right? Those range from 8 to 10 million to about 25 to 30 million. But you're spending a lot of money for that minimal option, and you're not getting a lot out of it. So in minimal, that money is buying you a new and fully complete parks maintenance facility at Cuyo. That's what the majority of that money gets you. For the rest of your water, wastewater, transportation folks, you haven't really done much to meet the needs for those groups. So that leaves mid-range and all in. They're about the same cost at this level of detail. And for us, the fact that all in allows you to keep all your groups together and does not carry the risk of having to build a transportation unit at City Yard, which we think is challenging, doable, but challenging. That's the way we're leaning. So in summary, and now you can really see what this option looks like, although if you agree that this is what we should work on for the recommendations phase, we'll be refining the site plan to make sure it's really working for you. But basically, this efficiently redevelops this operations center property that you already own, making good use of this fleet maintenance building. It's recommending that you're acquiring any or all of the adjacent property that you can, because that really will help. It'll help with phasing, it'll help with extra parking that you need, and it'll help make sure this is an option that will serve you, this is your 100-year option if you can buy some adjacent property and make the site work for you. And then because we're worried still about this being a little constrained, especially if you can't acquire property, keep in your mind that you might want to relocate parks maintenance to Cuyo or to some other site if you can't expand the property here and you find yourself in 20 years really still space constrained. So that's our thought. We'll be working to refine the site plan to make sure the circulation is going to work for your large vehicles and make sure we've thought through how if you are able to acquire some of these properties, how that might change the approach. And then we'll be working with leadership on how the funding plan for this will come together. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions.
I guess my first question I have is, there's quite a bit of property around City Hall. And we just purchased some property from St. Martin's University. Have we explored at all of purchasing property around City Hall and building there?
We haven't as part of this project. What we did was we reached out to our broker who gave us a per square foot cost. And it seems like our per square foot cost is fairly consistent regardless of what we purchase, whether that be a property that would be adjacent to the existing shop facility or property that's here around City Hall. So regardless, it doesn't really change the cost very much. It may, be a bigger discussion as far as do we want to relocate more functions to the City Hall campus, which we haven't had that conversation. But as far as like costs and logistics, it would be very similar to the other analysis that we've already done about purchasing another site somewhere in Lacey.
It seems like we got a pretty good price for the police station. I mean, I just, there's still a lot of property around St. Martin's, around the campus. I feel like that's something that should at least been looked at. Mike, you have your hand up?
If I could add on to that, Mr. Mayor, we
Sure.
have looked at those properties adjacent as part of the police acquisition process, and none of those are a minimum 8-acre section that we would need for operations start. And second to that, it's my understanding that St. Martin's is not interested in us acquiring additional property for an operations and laydown yard. There were some strict requirements that we agreed to for the police station to acquire that property, that we would not use it for those functions. So I don't think they're interested in discussing additional clearing and acquisition for this use.
It doesn't seem feasible that the potential site acquisition is really potential. On the one hand, on the corner there, you have Pints and Courts, and then you have the equipment rental place adjacent to it. What is it?
Celebrations.
Celebrations, yeah. And
Yeah.
why would, if I were an owner of either of those two properties functioning a business, why would I consider allowing the city of Lacey to pick up that property?
I think the point really is that site is a good location still.
Yeah,
And when you think of all of our services, the way the city's laid out, that really is a centralized location. So, right, if those properties don't come, maybe there's something further to the east or something like that. I think there's just the idea is that there is an ideal choice if we could maintain at that current site. Otherwise, we're going to go further north and we're going to be dislocated from really the majority of our population base.
when you guys did your property search, did you look anywhere in or around the urban growth area?
Yep.
And did you find anything that could potentially be suitable? Not currently.
We reached out to, I think you all know Joni Baker with Prime Location. She was our broker.
And let me just talk a tiny bit more about the acquisition opportunity. We have identified these properties as the most beneficial because they're contiguous and they solve some functional problems in the site. But Scott's right, any property in this zone would help to serve the functional need. And if I have learned one thing in 2 decades of doing this work for local government, it's that you have the speed and budget process that a local government operates in makes responding to opportunities to purchase real estate very challenging if you don't get ahead of it and make that work on it before the opportunity presents itself. So really the most important thing that I would like to recommend to you all is not about a specific property, but about that you, as part of adopting this plan, when you're ready to do that next year, if you could establish a support for staff to keep their eye on that, and have a budget that they have available so that when and if a property comes up, you're ready to move and you can be competitive. They
on the prep work.
exactly.
You can seize the opportunity if one appears.
Yes, because so tragic. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. The opportunities come, they're missed, and then the city ends up paying triple the price, 4 years later. I mean, there's just no reason, there's no downside in this consideration. If you don't need the property, you can make a decision 5 years later to sell it. So there's no reason to not move forward. Anyway, sorry, that's a soapbox moment for me. I've seen so much missed opportunity. Okay, any other questions or concerns?
Mike, I still see your hand up. You did.
Hey, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, first of all, go Bills. Second of all, I think Fitzpatrick's photography, he's retired now, and
That's down farther though. This next block down.
relocate. We don't want to see Pints and Courts go anywhere, but I think it's definitely doable. I would say I lean more towards the all-in because I'm a big, firm believer in being a good steward of the taxpayers' money. And I believe if any department in any city in the state of Washington or this nation has done that, it would be Lacey's Parks and Lacey's Public Works. So that weighs heavily on me. So that's my comments.
So, I mean, I guess what this really comes down to is the funding strategy. What can we afford and what does that look like, right? I mean, because that's the brass tacks on this thing is how do we pay for it? And would it require a public ask? Because if it can require a public ask, that's going to be difficult to sell to the public. You know, we may certainly appreciate our public works, but I don't know what that strategy looks like to go out for a public ask. You know, so I guess that's what this all comes down to is how do we pay for it?
Understood. Looking forward to working with your team on that for the next phase, assuming that council is giving us a head nod that at least we're headed in a direction that makes sense to you. We definitely need to work through the funding feasibility piece. If it's not feasible for Lacey to do this, then it's not the right option for us to explore, right? I will say that though you're right, it is challenging to have a public ask or sort of a voter support. You do have ratepayer funds for a portion. You do have some reserves. You have bonds that doesn't require. So you do have some levers here. And mostly we see funding packages coming together with these kind of facilities that are a multi-layered approach. So you get a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and you can pull it together. Yeah.
Since we are committed on a task toward building the new police and public safety center here, has any discussion been given to what becomes of the existing police department and that end of the building? Or am I-
Yes, let's
am I
get
jumping the
there.
shark?
Let's get there. Let's get there.
Seeing the future.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right.
I'm just gonna take a spin through animal services and parks, culture and recreation first.
Okay.
So for animal services, as you remember, the facility is aging. It is not purpose-built. There are significant issues. It is way too small. And there's just some issues operationally that make giving industry level standard of care very difficult. So we are actually recommending that a new facility, brand new facility is built on your current property. We think that that's actually really well located and you have the space on that current property to do that. However, we know that, and that would be for 18 to 23 million. We know that requires, adoption from JASCOM, which and funding, which is a lot to ramp up to, and all these things take time. So we will be working further with animal services on some interim solutions, stuff that will help them to limp them along until we can actually get that full service facility funded. So we're thinking critical system repairs, maybe some modular buildings that some of the operations can be moved, maybe outdoor storage, looking into some community fundraising, stuff that we're going to be talking to them about, but still TBD on the exacts of that interim plan.
So you're recommending both of these things?
Well, definitely the all-in, but they need some fixes in the interim, yes.
The answer is yes. We're just not sure exactly what those interim solutions are yet. We're hoping to work on that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I want to just say a disclaimer. We are showing you numbers. Recall from the beginning that these are in 2022 dollars. So if this project, let's say, takes 10 years to pull a capital campaign together, raise the funds, and those numbers are going to change. So it's really dangerous to get a number fixed in your mind and then find the revised cost estimates shocking because inflation does a number. So just be aware of that. These numbers will all go up the next time you see them because they'll be phased in over time.
I'll just make the council aware too that I'm going to be actually briefing JASCOM on Monday with a very, very high level overview to make them aware that we're going through this process and some of the recommendations, given that it's still very much a work in progress. But given that we have multiple jurisdictions at play, it's best to kind of step in early and make sure everybody's aware, because it's going to be kind of a team lift on this one, given that we have some, some pretty well defined, kind of final answer with a new facility. What we don't have yet is what it would take to get there, including the interim solution. So just to make them aware of all these things that are happening, given that it's budget season and all that. So I just want to make the council aware of that.
Question for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
So, as you said, JASCOM is multi-jurisdictional. So would this all, I mean, this wouldn't all fall on us then?
No, it's
This
a,
would be, the
Our
jurisdictions would all have to be
Yeah.
proportional. Okay.
Correct, correct. Good question, just good clarification.
So for Parks, Culture and Recreation, our alternatives really just focused on 2 facilities. Your senior center, you already have plans to expand it, and that is going to give it about 30% more space. And then your White House also has limited space for programming. It's the whole downstairs is used for storage at the moment. And then, of course, we are aware that there's demand for increased indoor recreation. So costing out that senior center expansion, that's going to be 2.7 to 3.3 million. The White House, we're recommending actually making use of the Goose Pond facility, moving that storage out of the basement of the White House and moving it to that, and then renovating that White House to be able to give more space for that indoor programming. And then, of course, we think that it's still a good idea to explore more options for that indoor recreation. We're aware that the department is continuing to explore partnerships with service organizations and schools. And then we think it's still also a good idea to have a feasibility study to kind of assess at some point what exactly is the community temperature for in that indoor programming space and what's the need there.
Huge.
All right. Any questions real quick on animal services or Parks, Culture and Recreation? Right. So for administration, as you are very well aware, it's a decent condition facility that was built in phases, but it is aging. And to note, there's a lot of inefficient space use. It's pretty awkward. And as you had said, the police facility being built, that's going to free up that 19,000 square feet. However, the central and east wing, which is the police wing, the former police wing, which is under, can you move the thing? We are labeling them west, central, and east. That the central and east wing are going to need significant investment to be able to get it up to code, meet the systems upgrades, modernize, all that stuff. So when we looked at alternatives, we did develop a bunch of alternatives for City Hall. We saw that the alternatives would cost anywhere between $12 to $55 million.
We were shocked. We talked to the cost estimator twice to make sure. Are you sure? She's sure.
So understanding that it was a significant cost, the vote was to take some time and reassess what direction is really needed. And also to note, looking at all the different players in this plan, we realize that police and public works and animal services are a much higher priority because your city hall has some options to be able to expand and absorb the growth that's coming. Play with different space use, for instance, the leased space in the third hall, or maybe just organize things a little bit better so that you can actually maximize the space use. It's not as critical as the other 3 are. So we are going to get into additional discussion to be able to clarify the direction that is desired by with your department leadership.
The other thing we realized through this process is not only were the all-in renovation options that give you everything you need very expensive and not your highest priority, that we needed to do more work talking with departments about how they want to serve customers and which departments should be next to others. So we had preliminary strategic discussions, but there was really more discussion that is needed there to understand how to best make use of the facility in the near term. Okay.
So moving forward, we are going to be working with city leadership to figure out what is some near-term options develop a near-term plan for City Hall. And then thinking about for the future, we think that it's important to determine that option at a later date once some of the other more critical needs have been addressed. So moving forward, the idea is to work with the directors to develop a bunch of concepts or ideas that really talk to what Julie was talking about, maximizing the space use, thinking of adjacencies and customer service and trying to figure out what exactly is the best way to meet those needs in the interim, what's critical right now so that we can go ahead and incorporate it into the future.
Thoughts or questions on that? So we did learn a fair amount through looking at different alternatives for this facility, but what we really did was identify that more work's needed to work with the departments on placement and also find some cost-effective improvements for the near term, given the other major facility priorities for the other departments. Ryan's computer agreed.
Oh, my computer is.
Is it a
having
banjo?
Yeah, exactly.
For the
Yeah.
for the east wing,
Yeah,
it has some, okay, so let's say, for example, that thing was completely empty,
yep.
right?
Mhm,
And everything was gone.
mhm.
Are there any walls that can be, are all those load bearing walls, or is there any?
So here's the situation. There are many improvements that can be done in that facility. However, and this is again, something we're gonna get into in more detail and refine in this next bit of work on this facility specifically. The reason that it's so expensive once you touch it is once you hit a major renovation, which is what you're talking about. As soon as you're doing more, just in simple terms, as soon as you're doing more than carpeting and painting and very, very simple stuff, you're hitting a major renovation. And when you hit a major renovation, you're upgrading all the systems and the seismic structural support to meet current code
Right.
in that wing. And doing that in that building, the way that building is built, is very challenging and very expensive. It's not set up to do that very efficiently at all, because it was built under a different code structure. And other people here know more about this than I do, but that's the upshot, and that's why we beat our head against the wall with the cost estimator. Are you sure? Are you sure? This is, I mean, never in my career have I had renovation of an existing facility be more expensive than taking it down and building new. And that's the situation you're in for your east wing. So that's why we thought, we need more work here. We need more work to figure out how can we use that east wing as cost effectively as possible to meet some of the current issues that your departments are having, make it more efficient to work out of here without triggering that major investment where you're essentially rebuilding a building within a structure that's not inefficient, to do that in. Any other thoughts or questions? It's a mind bender, we know.
It makes sense, the way the building's structured and having to worry about the seismic changes and, you know, anything you do, move a wall, it's gonna shift the whole integrity of the building, and that's gonna be more costly.
I think we forget too, the police station was built in 85.
Mhm.
We'll say the mid 79, that's right, 79. And then in the 80s, we did another expansion. There's another one in the 90s and then 2000. So it's almost like you've heard the term a shotgun house. I mean, the city hall was built in phases. And so you can kind of see where we tried to marry up, I say we, the royal we, but there's areas where, you know, the floors are doing this as it tries to marry up with the police station. And so you have independent
Frankenstein
systems.
building.
It is, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And that, so it seems like it'd be pretty easy to just take it down to the studs and rebuild it. And you're gonna, you know, it should be 60% of the cost of new construction, right? That's what a simple building would be. But it's a very complicated existing circumstance. Yeah. Next phase though, we're gonna get it, roll our sleeves up
Yeah, we saw
and work on what can we do? Where are there some efficient, and that's where Beth said, hey, should we look at options to retain, relocate, or reduce the congressional lease area that's up on the 3rd floor of the west wing? There's some underutilized space there. How can we minimally demolish some of the counter in this central and repurpose it for workstations and collaborative work areas while retaining a great customer service presence? So what can we do that doesn't maybe trip that major renovation, but still gets a lot of benefit for your customer service and for your departments? So we'll be taking a look. Yeah.
Julie, that brings up another question in my mind is, we're projecting office and space needs 10 years out or
Yes.
however far. There's already a move away from needing as many and people being more mobile with their things, working from home, working from other facilities. So are those kinds of things being looked at in terms of evaluating office space needs?
You bet. So another part of rolling up our sleeves is looking at your future capacity for desk sharing and hybrid office use. So how, and we don't intend to, as part of our process, solve that for the city. That's something that you're all going to have to work on, but we can provide some information about best practices. We can start a conversation with your leadership about where they want to go. And it's really about thinking about, hey, these kind of changes, you don't have to, it doesn't have to start on March 1st, right? You can have a vision of where you want to be in 5 years and work yourself there and test it and then adjust along the way. So yep, that's definitely part of it. And the customer service is the other part. So you don't need a football field long customer counter, right? That is not helping. On the other hand, going to, I was like, wow, this is really
I didn't even build it back.
it is a lot. It's a beautiful,
A lot of wasted space.
expression of your value that is customer oriented, but it is not space efficient. And I think you can express that value in a different, more space use efficient way.
The customer facing part is changing as well.
Yeah.
We have a lot more options
That's
for
right.
people to do things, make payments online, things like that. So I would have to imagine we have less people coming into City Hall than we did at one time.
Definitely do.
So there's, not only is the workplace changing like Carolyn was talking about, but the public is changing how they use the services.
Well, and that's where we need to have maybe a reimagining of what City Hall is. There obviously is a customer facing, it's the whole point of having City Hall.
Sure.
But do you need 3 doors? Is it 1 counter? What does the workplace look like? Do we have more creative space? How often people need to be here? That all needs to sort of be thought about. And, we could look to the, I'll say, latest City Hall designs to find out, but the pandemic has really kind of reset the entire environment too. So what does that look like?
But that is a lot of counter space. We start looking at it, that's a big counter.
Still going.
Is that the most you've seen?
It is.
Well,
I-
number 1.
Number one, number
I'm just trying to make this positive.
So, what are the steps here? What are the next steps?
Oh, thank you. Moving us along so we can wrap up. So our plan is to share some information about this project at Children's Day. We're excited about that. It's coming up. We would like to propose that we pause to dig deeper into City Hall alternatives that are reasonable, as well as those interim animal services solutions. We want to roll our sleeves up with leadership and finance to start working on how are we going to pay for this? What's a reasonable funding plan? Is this affordable for Lacey? Because as I mentioned, if it's not, then we need to, sharpen our pencils. And then hopefully be back in front of you and the public to talk about recommendations in the new year.
Okay. Any questions from council? Sounds good. Thank you.
Can I end on one more positive note besides we have the best counter within the state of Washington? It is a segue. So, this really is a maturation of the city. Think about how most cities do. They're lucky to build a city hall. And so we're now, and I'd say a privileged position to say, hey, long-term, what do we want to build a facility to best serve the public and also our workforce? So, I know the costs are staggering, believe me. When we first did this, I feel like I'm bleeding. But at some point, we need to start planning ahead and thinking about this and think of strategies on what's the best way to go forward.
The number sounds big also because we're talking about a lot of other big things right now.
Sure.
You know, we're talking about a police station at 40 million. We're talking about the, you know, the collaboration that we're talking about with the school district and the Y at 60 some $1 million, right? So I mean, we're talking about a lot of things with big dollar tickets.
True. So.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Our next agenda item is our historical commission terms. Janice, I see you're there and ready to go. We'll leave here.
Thank you.
Sure, go Rams.
We'll make it 2-0, Scott. Counting on you.
Yeah, Scott.
Thank you.
Go Rams.
Yep. Oh, all right. Is everybody ready to look at the historical commission terms?
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. Tonight, just wanted to review a proposal that the historical commission recommended. And just see if you have any questions about it. And then the next step, if council gives the thumbs up, is to just move it to a council meeting. So let me share my screen. So we have an interesting scenario here that's happened over the years, to where our current term expirations, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 commissioner terms expire in 2022. None of them expired last year in 2021. And or excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 expire in 2022. None expired last year and 2 expire in 2023. So in an attempt to get this evened out to where there are 2 terms expiring in 2022, 3 terms expiring next year, and then 2 terms expiring in 2024, which should be how the commission is staggered and most other committees and commissions. This is what the historical commission has proposed and approved, and we just need to see if council would support this change of the terms. So we don't have no one on the committee? Yeah, makes sense to me.
So this just needs to be, you do need action on this to move it to council though, is that correct?
I just wanted to see if you had any
Todd.
questions and just talk anything through prior to it going to an upcoming council meeting.
So if all you need is a thumbs up, that's
Yeah.
pretty.
Yeah.
This is pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
Thanks, Jen.
yep, thank you.
And so next up is our flag policy review. Shannon.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. That might have been one of the fastest agenda items I have ever seen. So thank you, Jen, on that one. Give me a second just to share my screen.
She's a model of efficiency.
So I'm here tonight to talk about a possible update to the flag policy. And so just to give some background for you all. First of all, there is no action necessary tonight pending the direction of the council. If there would be an action, it would occur at the next regular meeting by a resolution. The flag policy update has been discussed at several Commission on Equity meetings, including one in May and then one in July, as well as additional meetings with the Community Relations Committee, and this was really centered on the Juneteenth flag, and then the work session, which was also centered on the Juneteenth flag. A fiscal note, if adopted, the city would need to procure new flags to meet an updated flag policy. So really what we're here tonight to look at is a draft update of recommendations from the Commission on Equity in regards to City Council Policy and Procedures Manual Section 512, which is the flag policy. I've provided in your agenda packets a copy of the current city flag policy, and I've presented it right here. And as you can see, There are 2 city-approved flags, and one is the sister city flag, which would fly during the visit of the sister city delegation. And then the second one is the pride flag, which is to be flown annually June 1st through June 30th. The Commission on Equity took a look at the flag policy, and just briefly, the Commission on Equity is there to identify and advance opportunities that will create a more welcoming community, continue critical conversations on race and equity, seek greater participation from underrepresented community members, and identify existing gaps and barriers which could prevent full participation in government and public policy. And in 2022, one of the work plan items that was identified on the Commission's work plan was to review city recognitions as well as Heritage Month recognitions. And so as part of their May meeting, they started this by looking at the flag policy as well as the city's proclamation policies, and then contemplating Heritage Month recognitions. Just some background on flags, just generally speaking, there are several locations where we have flags around the city. So you can see we have City Hall, which we have the 3 flagpoles outside. We have flags flying at the Public Workshop, the RAC, Civic Plaza, Woodland Community Center, and then also in Hawks Prairie near the Coming Home statue. And you can see most of our flagpoles are single flagpoles, although City Hall and Hawks Prairie, there are multiple flagpoles.
Aren't there 3 at Civic Plaza?
I will show you a picture. I thought the exact same thing, and maybe,
There's not just
yes,
one.
there are 3. You are.
Yeah, there are
There's
Picture of
only
it.
one at Civic
Great
Plaza.
catch.
Yeah, there are
That's-
3.
Great catch. We'll get-
Well,
Okay.
actually, there's a whole bunch
Updated, and as you
of
can
the
see,
ones
the
in the
number of
back.
flags that are flying there would indicate that there are also 3. So great.
That'd be a
catch,
really
Councilmember.
busy poll. All
Yes.
those on it, yeah.
And in fact, too busy of a poll, as we'll go through here in just a second. So
Yeah.
as the question was just asked, yes, we have 3 flagpoles, so that'll certainly be updated. But you can see the 3 flagpoles here at City Hall, the 3 flagpoles at Civic Plaza, the 2 at Hawks Prairie, and then just for an example, the 1 flag that we have at the RAC, which is flying the Juneteenth flag this past June. So in your packet, you'll also see just some more information, just generally speaking on flag policy. There are some statutory requirements for flag display here in Washington State per the RCWs. You can see the code here is that city codes must prominently install, display, and maintain the US and Washington State flag on city buildings. In addition to that, there is an RCW about flying the US flag, the Washington State flag, and the POWMIA flag near its principal buildings on the days listed on this slide. As far as just kind of background on flag etiquette, American flags should be displayed following the protocol established in the United States Flag Code. And just some highlights are provided here, but it talks about where its prominence is, when it should be flown, when it should not be flown. And in addition to that, the Washington Secretary of State also provides some more information on flag etiquette with concerns to the US flag, the Washington State flag, and other types of flags. So for example, the Washington State flag should be displayed in the highest position of honor following the US flag and any other nation flag. And one other note too, the Secretary of State, they recommend that when the US flag, the Washington State flag, and the POWMIA flags are flown on a single pole, that the order should be the US flag, the POWMIA flag, and then the state flag. And so just to kind of give an example of what that would look like, on a single pole you have here on the far left column. And then if there were 2 flagpoles or 3 flagpoles, just an example in the right column. So the Commission on Equity reviewed the existing flag policy and came up with some revisions as well as some recommended additions for this body to consider. And so some revisions, number 1 would be, adding the purpose of the flag policy, expanding that. Really expanding that flagpoles are to be used exclusively by the city as a form of government expression. How flags are to be displayed, taking into account the flag etiquette that we just discussed. What the Commission on Equity's role in this process could be, and approval information should, the council in the future want to consider adding additional flags, what would that look like? In addition, they took a look at the flags and came up with some additional recommendations for flags. And I'll get into more detail in all of these, here in just a second, but their recommendation just briefly was to display the Progress Pride flag between June 1st to June 30th, with one notable exception that I'll get here in just a second. The second is to display the Juneteenth flag from the third weekend to June 19th, or from June 19th through the third weekend, whichever one comes first at City Hall and the RAC. And this aligns with the Juneteenth event that happens at the RAC. So the idea would be that it would be flying for Juneteenth through the Saturday in which the celebration was going on, if Juneteenth came first. And then if the Saturday came first, it would be flying until Juneteenth. So it's up for that period of time. In addition to that, to display the Nisqually tribe flag and the Squaxin tribe flag, with the Nisqually tribe flag flying from November 1st to November 15th, provided the city receives consent from the Nisqually tribe to fly the flag. And then the Squaxin tribe flag from November 16th to November 30th, again, providing that the city receives consent from the Squaxin tribe to fly the flag.
Why only those two?
Yeah,
It's
why?
'cause Chehalis tribe is also partially located in Thurston County, as much as Squaxin tribe is.
It's a good consideration and certainly something that we could take back to the Commission on Equity for consideration, Councilmember.
And I'm curious why only in November?
Yeah, and so briefly, I will say because that lines up with Indigenous Persons Month and National Native American Month as well.
Okay.
So just to go over in a little bit more detail, so to start with the revisions, really highlighting kind of the purpose of the policy and that city flagpoles are to be used exclusively as a form of government expression. In your packet, you can see the updated language. All of the red language is the added language, and there is some strikeout language as well, but really just clear language that says the purpose of the policy is to establish guidelines in order to ensure that the flags are used only for government speech and that they reflect the views, values, and goals of the city. The city's flagpoles are not intended to serve as a forum for free expression by the public. The city will not display a ceremonial flag based on a request from a third party, nor will the city use its flagpoles to sponsor the expression of a third party. So really providing greater detail. Currently in the flag policy, it says something to the effect that council members have to come independently to a decision, but this really clarifying that this is government speech and not a forum for the public. On how to be displayed, I know I went really quickly over flag etiquettes and the recommendations from the Secretary of State. So this would take that etiquette and incorporate it into the flag policy. So you can see that it expressly states conformance with federal and state laws as far as how flags are displayed, and then also uses the guidance from the Washington State Secretary of State. Commission on Equity's role in the process and approval. So there's some additional language that was incorporated in here that states that the Lacey City Council may request the Commission on Equity to review and provide recommendations on flag displays, as well as if you go down to the last couple of sentences, that the Lacey City Council approval will include a description of the flag to be displayed and the dates for the display of the particular flag, including if the flag will be displayed on a reoccurring or annual basis. Flags authorized by the Lacey City Council to be displayed on an annual basis should be incorporated into the policy document. So going on to the recommended additions for flags, the first one was to display the Progress Pride flag from June 1st to June 30th with the noted exception. And the noted exception would be when the Juneteenth flag was flying. So that the Progress Pride flag would come down City Hall and at the RAC to allow for flying the Juneteenth flag. Yeah, Councilmember.
That sometimes can coincide with when Pride weekend happens here in Thurston County. And so is there any way we could look into, because it feels like it would be kind of a slap in the face to fly the whole month except Pride weekend, because there's also the Juneteenth weekend.
Yeah, Councilmember, the problem that we run into is the space on the flag poles, and especially because we already fly, the POW flag, the Washington state flag. So it becomes pretty limited on flag display space. And that's why we're trying to find a solution that accommodates both of them.
Gotcha.
So another option, could be, looking into additional flag poles as well to increase space, but that's why we kind of came to that recognition of taking the progress or the pride flag down and flying the Juneteenth flag. This is particularly true when you get into single flag poles because you're creating a hierarchy of flags at that point as well.
Right.
I would trust the discussion and the deliberation of the Commission on Equity. I think that they probably had good discussions on how to do this in a respectful way to all the communities represented in Lacey. So, yeah, I yield to their expertise.
I absolutely agree.
So just some background on the Progress Pride flag. Very much like the rainbow pride flag that the city flies currently, it's designed to represent the LGBTQIA plus community. But in addition to that, it also recognizes centers and supports voices that have historically been marginalized members of the queer community, with an emphasis on people of color, transgender community members lost or living with AIDS and HIV. And you can see that focus incorporated with the forward-facing chevron on the left-hand side. And this flag was created in 2018 by Daniel Quasar. The next recommendation is to display the Juneteenth flag again at the third weekend to June 19th or June 19th to the third weekend at the RAC and City Hall. And the dates again being whichever comes first. And I know we went into detail at a previous council meeting on the Juneteenth flag, but just briefly, the symbols represent the white star being Texas and the last remaining enslaved people, the burst being a new beginning for African Americans and Blacks in the United States, the red arc being new opportunities for African Americans and Black Americans on the horizon, and then the red, white, and blue being the American flag, and a reminder that slaves our descendants are here living in America. Displaying the Nisqually tribe and the Squaxin tribe flags. And again, with the Nisqually tribe flag being displayed November 1st to November 15th with consent, and the Squaxin tribe flag being flown November 16th, November 30th with consent. And this kind of the dates to, in addition to aligning with Indigenous Peoples Month and Native American Heritage Month, the reason why we split the month, Councilmember, goes back to the point that I had mentioned earlier, was just the flag space and not having enough poles to accommodate flying multiple flags at the same time. So again, no action is necessary tonight. Tonight, we're just here to present and get some feedback to, see if we should bring this back to the council for consideration on the next regular council meeting. And so with that, that is the end of my presentation, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Oh, my first question is, what about when other groups want their flag flown and they come to us? I'll tell you up front, I was opposed to this flag policy when we passed it. I think it's extremely discriminatory. And I don't think that, I think this is better, but I still think it has some of the same issues. So what happens when other groups that are represented in our community, because our community is, as the most diverse community in Thurston County, what about when they want their flag flown?
Yeah, Councilmember, it's a great question. And, the way that the policy is structured is to, expressly state that this is a form of government speech. So the idea would be that.
How is that government speech?
The idea would be that if there was a majority of council that would want to consider that, right, then it could be considered, government speech. And then in addition, I guess what I would say, Councilmember, is the recommendation is also the council could direct the Commission on Equity to look into a future display of flags as well.
If I can step in just for a second, it's government speech because the city council is deciding and taking action on which flags to fly. That makes it government speech. Now, council may hear, through the community or through citizens about what particular flags in the future certain groups may want to fly, but it's never going to be a citizen group that approaches city staff or the like, and then there's some process by which their flag just gets flown. It's always going to be based on the city council's decision. That makes it government speech. That gets the city out of the First Amendment issues that other cities have struggled with when having some sort of policy that leaves it up to city staff or leaves it up to with very limited review over what flag gets flown. Then all of a sudden a flag comes up that gets denied. And now that's a problem.
So this council though, at any time, if there was some flag that I felt we should be flying for whatever period, I could bring that to this council.
Definitely.
And we could, but there would be a vote on this council and we can make that decision then.
Well, the council would then be amending the flag policy. Absolutely. And then making a decision to fly an additional flag or a different flag.
Well, but isn't it part of this policy that we're passing now is that we would refer it to the Commission on Equity for review?
It allows the possibility. It says that the council could direct the Commission on Equity to take a look into flags and provide
We're
a
the ultimate
recommendation.
decision makers.
I absolutely know at the end of the day, we're all the ultimate decision makers. However, the reason why we have a Commission on Equity for them to look into issues like this and to advise the council. And so I would like that to be a part of any future flag discussion, is that it would go to the Commission on Equity for a recommendation back to the council first. So let them have a discussion on it. It's why we created the Commission on Equity to begin with. Mike, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to caution. No, I agree with this 100%.
Okay. You froze up there for a second.
I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
You hear what I said?
We got the very beginning and the very end.
Oh, I was, we should be concerned that we don't require a full-time employee to do nothing but go around and change flags, though I support this 100%.
Is there any other discussion?
I just had one question that came to me from a constituent around the time that we had the pride flag flown and we were celebrating Juneteenth. And they asked about, on college, we have American flags flown for certain times of the year. And they said, what's the policy on those flags? Because Olympia actually also swaps out some of the flags on their downtown streets in recognition of things like Juneteenth and Pride. And this policy doesn't seem to contemplate the little flags that are on college.
Those aren't done by the city.
Oh, okay.
Those flags are actually
those
done by the
volunteers?
Lions
Club.
Lions Club actually puts up.
That's
those
probably the
flags.
difference then. Okay.
And the Lions Club, with volunteer support from the 1-2 Striker Brigade. So there's a lot of, hours that go into
Many
hanging up
hands,
all of those
yeah.
flags around the city.
Thank you. I had been wondering about that.
Anything else? This will be come back for the council. So
Well, I guess there's one other thing. You recommended a change, but what's gonna come before the council is gonna be in the format that it's in today? Or, the mayor made a suggestion, but I didn't hear any support or disagreement with the suggestion that would require it to go to the Commission on Equity. I personally prefer it the way it is, where we have that option, but I don't think it should be a requirement that it go there.
well, reason why I say that is because, this is a recommendation coming from our Commission on Equity. And we went through, this council has supported the commission to look at these issues, specifically issues like this. And so
Their recommendation didn't include them being required to send to them. This is their recommendation that we can send it to them, but that we don't have to.
that's true. Like I said, I would like the recommendation that any future flag discussion it would go to the Commission on Equity first for discussion. I don't know where the rest of the council is on this, but that's
Yeah.
We have a lot of things that we outsource before it comes to us, right? We have
Planning
So
commission.
we have the option, yeah.
land use, planning,
Yeah.
The land
all
use,
those
we don't have
different
an
things.
option. That's state requirement on that, but this would be our option, whether we want to. I am not against sending it to the Commission on Equity. I just don't think it should be a requirement that it go to the Commission on Equity first.
well, I just think the reason why I say that is because you sort of, say a controversial flag does come up, or whatever, and maybe we think it's controversial, maybe it's not. It's the reason why you have this Commission on Equity is to go through it and try to give a recommendation to this council. Maybe it's something we're missing, right?
And then we can.
I would think that if we did have something controversial to consider, that all of us would have the frame of mind to want to get the opinion of the Commission on Equity before making a concrete decision.
Sure.
But what Councilmember Greenstein is suggesting is that we maintain that option, we stay in control. We don't put that on the Commission on Equity to make a decision for us.
Well,
And-
the commission will never make a decision for us. What they do is they make a recommendation to us.
Exactly. So we maintain our ability to make a decision with or without the Commission on Equity. Some things I think that we as a council, as diverse as we are, we could probably figure out on our own without the Commission on Equity.
I think
But
I think it's more about putting it through a vetting process.
well, yeah,
So to vet out these things so that we don't have to do that
Right.
ourselves.
I would believe that we would do that regardless of what the policy says.
Well, the thing is we say that now, but in 10 years, there's no one on this council is here making that decision right now. I don't know. And so that's why you put stuff into policies, and then later, if a council doesn't like the policy, they can always change the policy.
So the other option is going to be bring it to us, and then we're looking at something, we don't know what this is, and send it to the commission, and then the Senate commission sends it back to us. Is that what you guys are?
That's what the commission is saying. That's what we have in front of us is their recommendation. And their recommendation is that the Lacey City Council may request the Commission on Equity to review and provide recommendations.
Yeah.
That's the Commission on Equity's recommendation.
Yeah, and let's be
Just saying
honest.
we follow their recommendation is all I'm saying.
I agree, but I don't think the Commission on Equity is gonna say you should always put, I think that's a decision that needs to come from us, not.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we should accept their suggestion.
Carolyn.
Well, I was just gonna say that the exception we just saw to the pride flag tonight is a good example of why the Commission on Equity ought to have first look at this thing, because if somebody else's flag is gonna have to be bumped to accommodate a new one, I think those kind of conversations would need to be factored in and part of the conversation.
So there's a big difference between may and shall, right? And so I think that they should go to the Commission on Equity. Whenever a new discussion about a flag comes up, it should go to the Commission on Equity first for a recommendation to the full council. Now, I mean, that's just my opinion.
I'll just add that if that's a requirement that's going to preclude council from making a decision in a timely manner, and I'm not positive, but I think perhaps when council last adjusted this, there was a time crunch in order to get a flag flown.
That is
And-
correct.
So a requirement to go to the commission would delay that.
And
true.
always waive it if we, if there was a time crunch, right?
Not if it's policy, we can't. That
I
would
don't
take,
support
that would take action by the council,
To waive the
and that would just delay it further.
Or not.
Guys, I wouldn't support anything that handcuffs us in decision-making process in any meeting.
Well, I think at the end of the day, I think Carolyn's right. I mean, if policy is in place, it all takes is four of us to vote a different way, and you can change the policy and do it. I think this is just a normal recommendation for your standard flag policy would be a normal recommendation for the Commission on Equity to take it up. But how about you prepare this flag policy, and we can have even more of the discussion once before us.
I have a problem with that. That's an option, as a way to go. We have a recommendation. We should be taking action on the recommendation, not on some different version of the recommendation that you want, that we haven't voted on to make a
Well,
change with the
You're
recommendation.
right. You're right.
Recommendation should come as it is here, and at the council meeting, if you want to change it, you should make a change there.
So council members, this will come before you as a resolution. So there would be opportunities at that point to have further.
But will the resolution look like this, or will it have the shall? In other words, what I'm saying is I want the resolution to have what the commission is asking for, that we may send it there. If they then want to change it with a vote, that's fine, but it shouldn't come before us just on the mayor's recommendation that we change the recommendation of the commission.
Yeah.
So what are you?
So
That's
my-
fine. Lenny, if you want me to make the recommendation at a normal council meeting, I can do it then. I don't have a
Yeah,
problem.
I mean, I just think you should, this should be what's in front of us, and we should make a motion on this.
When are you
And
planning?
if you want to change it at that time, you can.
So the
Fair.
deputy mayor had a question of when, so it would be at the next regular council meeting, which would be September 15th. And so we'll prepare the resolution with the recommendation as currently proposed for the council to consider at that meeting.
Fair enough. Sounds good.
Will we have time to vet the question about the Chicago's tribe between now?
Councilmember, no, I don't think we'll have the time to vet the question. However, I do think that's something that we could bring back to the Commission on Equity for kind of a future discussion and further research into and due diligence on.
That would make sense. That would go to the commission. Thank you for proving the point. Anyway, let's go on to the next agenda item, which is the RFP for PEG services. Back to you, Shannon.
All right, so I have the last presentation for the night, so give me one more second to start. And then let me know. You can see the presentation?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so my last presentation here tonight is to talk about a PEG RFP that the city is currently working on. So the recommendation is no action at this time. This is really just informational only. There has been a prior review on this. This will be the first time, but this is something that will be coming back to the council later on and for more discussion at a future point. The fiscal note is to be determined based on our research into this and then also the types of proposals that we receive as part of this request for proposals process. This is a collaborative effort between the city of Lacey, the city of Olympia, the city of Tumwater, and Thurston County. I've included in your packets tonight in attachment 1, there is an interlocal agreement that the city manager entered into a while back for the jurisdictions to work together on this request for proposal for public education and government television production and programming services. And so you'll hear me refer to PEG throughout this presentation, and that's really what it's referring to. And I'll get into a little bit more detail of what that is here in just a second. As far as the anticipated timeline for the RFP, we're really looking to issue an RFP in mid to late September. And then as part of the process for the RFP, we would have it open likely for a period of 4 or more weeks. And during which we would have an allowance for people to ask questions and then also to tour our current facilities here in City Hall to learn a little bit more about the technologies that we have in place. And then the idea would be that we'd be executing a contract. So bringing, more information again in front of the council here at a later point, and then executing a contract for services if desired sometime by December, and then commencing services sometime January 1st, 2023. So some background, some of you all recall that we just entered into a cable franchise with Comcast last year in February of 2021. And as part of this franchise agreement, and all of the jurisdictions work together on this as well. So we all entered into franchise agreements at roughly the same period of time, and all of them were for 10 years. So all of our contracts for the cable franchise will expire in 2031. These are non-exclusive franchise agreements. So if there was another, cable provider that came into the community, we would go through the process of a cable franchise with them as well. Federal law authorizes us to enter into cable franchises, and it also allows jurisdictions that can authorize cable franchises into establishing franchise requirements for PEG services. As part of our existing franchise with Comcast, they provide the city with 30 cents per month per residential subscriber for capital costs related to PEG. And I've included as part of tonight's packet, the part of the franchise agreement that outlines this particular item of the Comcast PEG fee. So PEG is, again, public education and governmental access. And this is the definition provided by the Federal Communication Commission. So one thing to note is that PEG channels are not mandated by federal law, but but rather they are given the right by a franchising authority such as the city to exercise that, and we have exercised that in our franchise agreements with Comcast. So public, the P is public access channels, which are available for use by the general public. They are usually administered either by the cable operator or by a third party designated by the franchising authority. The E for educational is educational access channels, which are used by educational institutions for educational programming. Time on these channels is typically allocated among local schools, colleges, universities, by the franchising authority or the cable operator. And then the G is for governmental access. So these are governmental access channels, which are used for programming by local governments. In most jurisdictions, the local governments directly control these channels. So as part of kind of looking at where we were at with these services, we did an environmental scan of what was going on in Washington, and we used a couple of resources. We took a look through some peer cities websites, as well as franchise agreements, and then also a couple of websites that had more information on existing PEG channels. And what we found was that most municipalities in our initial scan here in Washington state only offered the G of the PEG services. There's no requirement to offer all the P, the E, and the G. And so what we found in our research is that, you know, most of them are offering the government, and there are a few that are offering just public, and then 3, as you can see here, that have the full PEG, and then several that just have the public and government. As part of our scan too, we also did a little bit of a deeper dive looking at peer jurisdictions and what was going on with peer jurisdictions. So we looked at every jurisdiction that had a population of over 40,000 to a population of under 100,000. So you can see there are several cities that we're considering as kind of peer jurisdictions. Lacey is highlighted in the blue on the left-hand corner, and you can see the next column over has population. And then just to the right of that, it identifies if the jurisdictions are offering what PEG services. And again, what you can see with our scan here is that a lot of peer jurisdictions are offering government only, a few being offering public government or educational government. And then, you know, Lacey and Olympia really being the only providers currently of the full kind of PEG services. We also took a look at franchise fees and utility taxes. And so as you can see here, most of the jurisdictions in our peer group have franchise fees like we currently have. In addition to that, most of them also have utility taxes on cable. And we've also did a little bit of research into kind of what the utility tax rate was for those jurisdictions. So this was just really to give us kind of a sense of what was going on, you know, in similar sized cities as we start to take a look at what kind of services might be necessary for the city as far as PEG services.
The Puyallup had a bigger population. Just curious observation.
It is a really, really good point. And Puyallup actually, as part of, and this is probably why it was taken out, Councilmember Kunkel, that's an excellent point, is they actually work with Pierce County on their PEG services. So they contract out for those services to Pierce County. So just some background, we all of the jurisdictions currently have operating agreements with TC Media for PEG services that expire at the end of this year. And TC Media provides that public access services with TC TV. Over the past 10 years, cable and community access television has rapidly changed. You know, we have seen kind of the proliferation of smartphones and other accessible video technologies. I kind of look around and we've probably got at least, I don't know, 10 cameras around here if I was to calculate what we have on this table. So, you know, making films and videos has become more accessible than it was, you know, 10 years ago, even more accessible than it was 30 years ago. In addition to that, there's just been an expansion of how people communicate. It's no longer, you know, just antennas or cable there are several mediums that are accessible for individuals to communicate news and information, including, social media platforms, streaming that we do on like our website, YouTube, et cetera. So there's a multitude of options that are available, not only for us, but also for the public currently. At the same time, nationally, when we look at cable subscribers, they have declined as more and more consumers are opting to go cordless with subscriptions to streaming services. And so just to provide an example of that, I found this article on the Pew Research Center in 2021 that states that the share of Americans who say they watch television via cable or satellite has plunged from 76% in 2015 to 56% in this year, which again was 2021. I provided the graph that they also had in that article, and one thing that they noted was that the share of younger adults receiving TV via cable was the most dramatic of those plunges, and you can see that on the second to left. It went from 65% down to 34% for the age group of 18 to 29. So here, just looking at Lacey, took a look at our Comcast PEG fees, which again, if you recall, we get that fee of 30 cents per residential subscriber per a month. So taking a look at that total, we could find roughly approximately what the number of subscribers were here in the city of Lacey in the last year. And you can see that in 2019, we had a high of almost 11,000, and moving to 2021, that's declined to about 10,000.
With our population growing.
Correct. Yep.
Percentage to the moment.
So why the RFP update? This really allows us to take all of the things that I just talked about and comprehensively review and evaluate future media and PEG services. As part of this evaluation, we'll also be taking a look at, we're looking for requests for proposals, but we're also going to be doing our due diligence on what this could look like if we were to offer, some services in-house. And the RFP, the way that we're styling this is what we're calling the a la carte style. So we're really wanting to see what potential designated service providers, and designated service providers are those who would be providing PEG services or could be providing PEG services, to identify what services they are interested in providing the jurisdictions and at what costs. And then making note that they don't have to necessarily provide all of them to be considered as part of this process as we evaluate holistically what we're looking for. And then really for each jurisdiction to make the determination in the future what is going to be the best fit for them. So while we're doing this RFP collectively, each jurisdiction is obviously going to retain the right to make and enter into any future contracts if they choose to do so as part of this process. So again, the advantage is really kind of with the timing. This allows us to comprehensively evaluate our PEG services and our future service needs at this time. So that is the end of my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions the council might have on this topic.
When the TCTV lease at the Comcast building is going to end?
So TC Media entered into a new lease agreement last year, and I believe it was for a 5-year lease agreement. So their lease agreement would expire sometime in 2024.
Okay.
25.
And are they part of this study at all, or?
So TC Media has the opportunity to provide a proposal if they want to.
Right, okay.
So what other kind of companies other than them would we be going out to? Like, who else might be the kind of company that might bid on part of this?
Council member, that's one thing, just to see who and what is out there. Again, we have never gone through an RFP for these services. So part of it is to see, what potentials could be there for services in the future.
Right.
The main one is who does all the state variants.
CW.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, they're the ones that are the only other player out there that is would probably be bidding on this.
okay.
But the way that this RFP is structured, if Lacey decides to just go with a service provider that's providing the G,
Mhm.
Olympia could make a different choice, Tumwater could make a different choice based on what they assess their needs to be.
Correct.
Very true.
Well, one thing about TC Media is that not only provides programming, it provides training for people to use high def cameras, the studios, that sort of thing. It really is quite a fine community resource. And
Yeah, that's the education side of the PEG. It's the E that they have to provide for us. So,
absolutely.
and that others might not, and that could be a consideration in all this too. I mean, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
And just a real quick clarification on that, Mayor, that it's really the P. The E is really focused on colleges and, resources like that. And the P would be kind of the public, not only the access, but training.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought the education was other educational opportunities, having to do with videos and stuff like that.
So it's more educational programming, in other words, not those opportunities. That's the P. Okay, correct.
So are you saying by that rationale that it's maybe St. Martin's is using a platform that we might take a look at or would also be in need of this service?
So other colleges and institutions have partnered with franchising authorities to be part of PEG services. So I'm not necessarily that St. Martin's is interested, but there are other colleges and universities, et cetera, that do use PEG funding and fees to create programming and services for communities.
Yeah, well, this will be interesting. Like you said, we've never gone out. We've always been part of the consortium, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out for us.
Well,
Anything else from the council?
So.
Well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. So without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thanks.